Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. On January 31st, the LA Police Commission unanimously voted to reappoint Chief Michel Moore to his second term, and I'm delighted to welcome him into the studio today to talk all about everything. So good to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so you've been appointed to a second term, but I actually have to say your first term doesn't end for a while.
That's true. The first term ends on the 26th of June, and there'll be a re-swearing in, if you will, for that second term, second and final term.
Okay, well, 5 years goes pretty darn quick.
I'm encouraged. As we exit the pandemic, I'm particularly encouraged because we're beginning to see our society go back to some of its norms and some of the rituals, some of the things that keep us together as a species. We're a herd group, meaning that we don't work well by ourselves. And as we're coming out of this pandemic, we're seeing the results of that with lowering of violent crime, fewer shooting victims, less homicides, lives that are being saved. We're seeing re-engagement with our communities, opportunities for us to attend town halls. I have one after this. I'm encouraged that the trust in this department has increased. Trust that we're doing the right things, that we can be relied upon. And while we still have areas in which to improve, there's more work to be done, and let's get to it.
A lot of the tragedies that happened after the pandemic with George Floyd, et cetera, the impressions of the police had to be readdressed.
I believe that community policing, relationship policing requires those underlying values to permeate the entire organization. And that every position within an organization is there to build public trust and confidence that our work matters and it's purposeful, that it's going out to protect the communities and to serve the communities. The interplay with the department is really the glue that comes to a community and says, I know that you've distrusted not just the police, but there's a mistrust of government. We have failed you, the police and others, on so many different fronts. And we want to bring with a group of officers who have been specially trained and are committed to staying in your community for the next 5 years. We want to have them come and sit down and hear and listen to your experience, and to understand and to recognize and acknowledge the mistakes of our past, whether it's the police or others, and map a course forward that says what is important to you, and let's work together to improving the conditions of your community, and also understanding and improving how policing in your community meets your needs. And when we do something that is counter to that we recognize it and find, are there other strategies other than some of our traditional strategies? And what we've seen in the last decade is we did not see the same levels of violence increase in these communities. In fact, we now see reductions in violence that is exceeding the reductions by percentage that we're seeing as a city. We saw less police use of force, we saw fewer arrests, and we saw the trust in the police go up.
What are the big takeaways on how you see the use of force in emergency response situations?
So I think that, first of all, it's ensuring that the public has accurate information about how often or rarely we actually resort to any level of force and the number of encounters that we have. We publish each year, and I encourage the public to go to LAPD online, it's an online website, and look up our use of force annual report. We'll be coming out with the latest edition here within the next 2 or 3 weeks, and it'll report on all of this issue from 2022. But there's the last 7 years are still in there, and those reports will show that over the millions and millions of encounters, the vast majority of them, 95, 96, 97%, 98%, don't involve any force at all.
But you never hear about that.
Success often is not broadcasted. You don't know the things that you prevent. You can't count those, and you don't see if an arrest or an encounter or even a contact is without any type of conflict. Those just get bundled up as, okay, well, there's nothing to see here. But in reality, those are important because many of those instances had ingredients of conflict, had ingredients and levers that could have been pulled or could have been activated by a wrong approach by the policing. So the vast majority of time, our officers come into tumultuous, uncertain, and complex situations, and they're able to safely resolve them. They're safely to find alternatives, to create time and distance, and to find ways in which not to have to resort to force. Now, last year, though, 2,200 instances out of the 1,600,000, 1,700,000, 1,800,000 encounters, we had to resort to force. The vast majority of those was using physical force that the person complained of an injury. The person wasn't nothing greater than that. But there was also 31 instances in which we resort to the use of deadly force. And in those instances, that's a reduction from the year before of 37. Our historic low is 26 and 27, which was the first 2 years of my tenure as chief. 26, 27, 31, 37, those are the lowest numbers that we've seen since 1990. That was the last time we counted, or that we have records of the numbers of officer-involved shootings. Those numbers have often exceeded 60, 70, 100, 110. So we've seen improvements, and we've seen improvements both by better policies, stricter accountability, better tools, and much more success in the areas of training. However, we still had, with 31 officer-involved shootings, 31 too many. And our effort is to have that number at 0.
You have this balance that you need to maintain between recruitment and also making sure that the mental health capacity and capability of your officers is sound, and that you can determine what kind of chinks in the army before you actually put a badge on them.
We need to hire hundreds and hundreds of personnel in the aftermath of this pandemic and in the attrition of our workforce. And in this market, that's an uphill battle. But what we're saying is a couple things. One, we're not going to lower our standards to meet those numbers. There are people who I've seen that mistake in the past. I've seen agencies that today are adjusting standards per se so that they can meet their numbers. And we're not going to do that, because every time that has ever happened, 5 to 7 years later, you get an echo effect of an organizational failure that costs you many more than just going without. So we're going to only hire those that are qualified, period. Now, we are going to look and ensure that the qualifications are relevant. And what I mean by that is something as simple as cannabis. When I came on the organization, there was gas lamps and Model Ts, but 1981. But the fast forward 40 years later, cannabis today is adult for adult use is a legal drug. It's a legal intoxicant, and so standards of yesterday in regards to the absolute prohibition of using cannabis, and it really, as recently as 5 to 10 years ago, if you admitted to using cannabis, you would not be hired. Today, that's different. So people need to know that our standards today are relevant to what our societal standards are. But they also must know that the use, for instance, of cannabis, like alcohol, if there's evidence of abuse, of misuse, then that is not a person that's suitable for this job, for the privilege of wearing this badge. But we make those adjustments because we want to live within the norms of society. We also recognize that, for instance, on the financial side, we've gone through a terrible period with the pandemic. And people may have fallen back on a payment or on rent or some other obligation. And so they come in with a checkered credit history. Well, that's not an automatic disqualifier. We're adjusting and looking at the whole person and recognizing their life circumstances. And as long as they can act and demonstrate a responsibility to their financial obligations and understand the means of living within their means, we want to invest in that person who wants to invest in this profession and be a part of this department. So background standards are relevant to today. They are still stringent. We look to the emotional intelligence, the integrity, to not be about them, but be a life of service. Policing is not about enemies. Policing is about service and protecting people from those that would prey upon others. The city of Los Angeles is a safer city when all Angelinos are working together for just that goal.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.